far as snow is concerned, folks aren't going to be measuring this with rulers. It's more so yardsticks in some spots.
Stay indoors, stay off the roads, watch the snow come down, watch the worst possible reality TV show you can find, and take some time away from the roads.
This is Today's It Happened. Good Friday evening to you. I'm Stephanie Liebergen here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories from the day. From the massive looming snowstorm expected to blanket much of the country this weekend to the impending showdown in the Senate over ICE funding ahead of another government funding deadline. But first, this morning I spoke with Scripps News meteorologist Trent McGill about what to expect as the snow begins to fall. More than half the country is bracing for that major winter storm that's threatening to bring historic amounts of snow and ice. The storm set to begin today in the plains and could impact almost 200 million people. So let's get the very latest on the ever-changing forecast. Scripps News Group meteorologist Trent McGill joining me now. So what exactly do we know about where this storm is headed?
Well, we know a lot, and we still got to learn a lot as well. Like you said, so many people impacted. I mean, just look at the alerts. The cold weather, just the alerts from the cold weather alone stretch from Canada to Mexico. That's the darker blues you're seeing in there. What kind of goes on top of that, what kind of preempts all of that, is going to be the moisture added to it, the winter storm watches and warnings. These are the winter storm warnings that, or advisories at least, that stretch from New Mexico 2,200 miles away to Maine. So this is a widespread, like you said, eastern half of the nation, even more so than that, that's going to be impacted from this. And not everybody's going to be impacted by the same thing. Yes, we're all cold, but on different levels of cold. Check this out. This system, as it rolls through the weekend, is going to drop a bunch of either snow, sleet, freezing rain, or just straight up rain as this thing continues to roll essentially from the Pacific through Texas, Louisiana, and all the way up into the Northeast. So some big time moisture and some big time dynamics coming with all of this before it finally shoots out off the East Coast. Now, as far as snow is concerned, folks aren't going to be measuring this with rulers. It's more so yardsticks in some spots. I'm talking about over a foot of snow in some areas that don't typically get over a foot of snow. Outside of that, the numbers drop off pretty significantly. Very cold and warmer, which transitions everything over to more of a freezing rain potential. You ready for this? Check out the changes. Instead of inches or feet of snow, I'm talking about tenths of inches of freezing rain. And if it's a little bit warmer, or a little bit cooler rather, then we're going to be talking about sleet. Big time power outages, big time impacts, and it's going to be area or widespread essentially across the eastern half of the nation. So several things we're going to be watching and keeping an eye on. Stephanie?
Trent, what do we know about timing-wise? It's starting today. Is it going to extend all the way through maybe the Monday morning commute? Are we looking at wet stuff all weekend long?
Totally depends on where you are. If you're in Texas by Monday, it's cleanup essentially. If you're in New York, if you're in Maine, if you're on the East Coast, absolutely. This thing should be wrapping up by the time we get into Monday. It will likely impact Monday morning for a lot of the folks on that East Coast, but less of an impact and more of a cleanup as it leaves, the plains.
Scripps News Group meteorologist Trent McGill, thank you very much for the very latest on this winter storm. As someone who loves a good snowstorm, I'm a little excited. Thank you. The Federal Emergency Management Agency has abruptly halted the termination of hundreds of disaster workers in light of this massive winter storm on the way. In an email Thursday, staff were told FEMA would stop dismissing workers whose contracts are expiring. Sources say the looming storm was a major factor in the sudden pause. Roughly 300 disaster workers have been let go this month, with only a handful receiving contract extensions. The decision came hours after Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem visited FEMA headquarters for a storm briefing. The Trump administration is conducting a major FEMA overhaul with thousands of employees lost to layoffs and buyouts. Right now, I want to pop up to New York City, where the new mayor, Zohran Mamdani, is giving a news conference on the city's preparations for this major weekend storm we're looking at. Let's listen.
Good morning, New York City. This is the calm before the storm. Either late tomorrow evening or early Sunday morning, we are going to see snow start to begin to fall across our city. It will fall and then fall some more. And the forecasts don't always get it right, But what is being predicted right now, whether it's a foot of snow or even a little bit more, would be one of the biggest snowfalls that our city has seen in years. We haven't seen a foot of snowfall in quick succession since nearly 5 years ago. This weekend is going to be cold, it is going to be windy, and above all else, it is going to be a weekend where your city is prepared. Across every single level of government, we are working together to ensure that our streets are being kept clear, that New Yorkers are safeguarded, and that the most vulnerable among us are being connected with shelter. At 6 a.m. this morning, the sanitation department began brining our highways and major roadways. And for those unfamiliar, brining is a process where a salt and water solution is sprayed, making it much harder for snow to stick and for ice to form. Tomorrow, as the storm nears, we're going to see thousands of DSNY collection trucks and agency partners transformed into the nation's largest snow fighting operation. This is an operation that I trust with every ounce of my being in being the ones that will deliver us the exact kind of city response we need to see this weekend. We are going to see more than 2,000 of those sanitation workers begin 12-hour shifts starting tomorrow evening. They will salt as soon as we see the first snowflakes hit the ground with 700 salt spreaders. And then as soon as we see 2 inches of snow accumulate, we're going to see 2,200 plows activate across the city. I want to encourage New Yorkers to do their parts to stay safe this weekend. That is why we are issuing a hazardous travel advisory for Sunday and for Monday. So if you need groceries, if you need a new winter coat, if you need anything, frankly, that you are thinking about for this weekend, today is the day to make that trip. Because once the snow begins to fall, I want to encourage New Yorkers to do something that we don't often have the luxury of doing, which is to take a breath and stay home. Stay indoors, stay off the roads, watch the snow come down, watch the worst possible reality TV show you can find, and take some time away from the roads. Because while this is going to be a big storm, these are the kinds of challenges that New Yorkers and the hardworking men and women of New York City government overcome all the time. And it's a moment that this city is prepared to meet. So I ask once again to stay out of the elements and to know that the people alongside me and the hardworking men and women who are already hard at work across this city will be the ones to ensure that this is a storm that meets its match in this city.
Coming up on Today's It Happened.
These are the accomplishments of what we've produced, all page after page after page.
Welcome back to Today's It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories. Helicopters will be permanently banned near Ronald Reagan National Airport in Washington. That is starting today. The FAA announcement comes nearly a year after a deadly midair crash killed 67 people when a passenger jet and a Black Hawk helicopter collided over the Potomac River last January. The FAA says the restrictions are necessary to prevent future midair collisions. President Trump is once again questioning the loyalty of NATO. He now claims the alliance's troops, quote, stayed back from the front lines in Afghanistan. But NATO allies did fight alongside U.S. troops for 20 years, and more than 3,000 allied troops died in the conflict. Scripps News international correspondent Ollie Barrett is live in London, joining me now. So, Ollie, Trump's statements are really sparking outrage among our allies. What has been the response you're hearing today?
The response in Europe has been one of anger, one of outrage, one of dismay. There's been a range of emotions being expressed by veterans, by the families of veterans who lost their lives in Afghanistan fighting alongside American troops, and from politicians across the political spectrum as well. Here in the UK, the strongest rebuke we have ever heard from UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer to President Trump. He has called the comments insulting and frankly appalling, and he seems to be suggesting that President Trump needs to apologise. The Prime Minister saying, if I had misspoken in that way, I would certainly apologise. Earlier, number 10 Downing Street described President Trump's comments as wrong, and we also heard from a government minister that he said he was sure that the Prime Minister would directly raise the issue in a phone call at some point with President Trump. But as I say, similar reactions across Europe. We've heard from Poland's defence minister saying that the country's sacrifice will never be forgotten and must not be diminished. One Danish MP has called the comments ignorant. The leader of the opposition politician Kemi Badenoch here in Britain says that Donald Trump's descriptions of the actions of Allied troops alongside the Americans in Afghanistan were flat out nonsense. So that gives you a sense, I think, of the almost unanimous response here in Europe among NATO allies to what President Trump said.
Well, President Trump also suggested on social media that NATO troops should help defend the U.S. border against illegal immigration. Have you seen any reaction to those remarks?
Well, look, European leaders do not believe that what is happening and has happened across the United States southern border would at all amount to something that would qualify for an invocation of Article 5 and therefore NATO allies to come to America's support in that region. That said, European leaders, I mean, just looking at the example of the recent days with the American threats against Greenland, European leaders are well aware that some things that Donald Trump says that in the past they might not have taken seriously do need to be taken seriously, and so they will, I'm sure, be looking at what they would do if Donald Trump were to follow up on such a request and put down an Article 5 request to them in some way. The other thing that is being pointed out here in Europe is just the scale of the loss of life from NATO allies in Afghanistan. 457 British service personnel lost their lives, for example. But also, if you look at the per capita numbers in terms of sacrifice, the USA at the top with 7.93 deaths per 1 million population. Denmark just below that on 7.7, the UK just below on 7.2. So those are the types of comparisons that are being made here in Europe today.
And of course, the United States, the only nation to ever invoke Article 5, and that happened after the attack on 9/11. Scripps News international correspondent Ollie Barrett, live for us in London. Thank you very much for your perspective. President Donald Trump officially hit the year one mark of his second term, and if you ask him, things are going pretty good.
An amazing period of time. We have a book that I'm not going to read to you, but these are the accomplishments of what we've produced. All page after page after page, individual things. I could stand here and read it for a week and we wouldn't be finished.
Well, the American people might be telling a different story. Joining me now is our Scripps News political director, Andrew Rafferty, to kind of break down some new polling that we've got. So the president saying that they are fake polls, saying they were wrong in 2024 and that they're wrong again. So what do these polls have to say, and does the president have a leg to stand on in his criticism?
Steph, as you noted, we are in a reflective mood now that we've officially hit the 1 year mark of Donald Trump's second term. So we got a bunch of polling over the past few days, and it has caught the president's attention in a more negative way than you might expect. But we can sort of level set here just where the president is now that we are 365 days plus into this term. Not uncommon, Steph, you know this, for a president's job approval rating to go down pretty dramatically. And after almost really the moment after they put their hand on the Bible, we start to see his approval ratings drop. But for Donald Trump, it was almost immediate. This is the New York Times polling average, which maybe we don't have, but if we do, we'll put it on screen. Basically, his approval had gone down about 10 points. And what is interesting here, there it is that it almost immediately went down. Whereas presidents in the past have a bit of a honeymoon period, Donald Trump really didn't have that. And I think a lot of that was driven by what he did in the first few weeks in office were stuff that weren't really on the radar during the 2024 campaign. I'm talking about tariffs, all these crazy tariffs that were throwing the stock market into upheaval. Doge, we talked about
Lots of executive orders.
Lots of executive orders. Talked about cutting federal spending, but cutting USAID, that didn't really sit that great with a lot of the voting public. But I think the thing that caught the president's attention most is the economy, because his numbers on the economy dropped pretty precipitously. And you can ask, in that same poll, the question was, Trump's policies have made life ... A majority of the country say less affordable. And that, I think, really stings because he was the president who was brought to office on this question of affordability. He threw out a lot of stats in that press conference that he did on Tuesday that were not really accurate, talking about inflation, price of groceries, price of gas. for a lot of Americans, they are still feeling a pinch in the same way they were during Joe Biden's tenure.
So another big focus of the Trump administration, of course, is immigration enforcement and the actions of ICE and the actions of Border Patrol. Yeah. What do the polls have to say about the public's attitude there?
Yeah, it is interesting, and I think it's not a surprise. We saw J.D. Vance yesterday going, in his words, to soothe or comfort, take down the temperature over the issue of immigration. Because look at this. This is the approval of the job that ICE is doing. And it is just about 36% of the broader electorate. Of course, the widespread support with Republicans there, not so much with Democrats. But it's really those independents in the middle. Just about 3 in 10 independents say that they approve of the job ICE is doing. 61% also in this poll say that ICE has gone too far. And so you talk about the main two issues of the campaign, 2024, it's the economy, it's immigration. And by and large, Donald Trump's standing on immigration is still okay. But you can see, there are a number of members of the administration who are concerned about the political toll that ICE specifically in these communities, whether it's Minnesota or some of the other places we've seen around the country, the political toll that it is taking among those key independent groups. And of course, this is all coming, just so happens to be a midterm year.
Of course.
Don't know if you heard about that. So all of this will come to play with a lot of discussion between now and November.
Yeah, certainly. And the Trump administration showing no signs of backing off on their immigration enforcement concerns. So, we don't know what community, what city, what state might be next on their list. Political Director Andrew Rafferty, as always, good to have you on set. Thank you, my friend. We'll be right back with more of today's top stories on Today As It Happened. Watching Today As It Happened, Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. So let's jump right back in.
More than 1,600 flights have been canceled ahead of a massive winter storm. 170 million people on alert for that massive weekend storm stretching from New Mexico to Maine. One of the biggest dangers from this storm is ice in the south. Up to an inch of ice is possible in some areas. That could paralyze roads for days.
Look, 31 years working for NOAA, there's only a handful of times that I can remember watches and warnings stretching 2,000 miles, right? And you look at that, and half the country's population is going to see some sort of winter weather impact.
Forecasters saying D.C., Philadelphia, New York, Boston, all could see up to a foot of snow in some areas around the I-95 corridor. Here are the latest models. Forecasters urging you to make sure that you have at least a few days worth of food, water, medications, and other basic necessities for you, yourself, and your family, and your pets to sufficiently ride out this storm. Jury selection now been set for September 8th for Luigi Mangioni's federal trial. Mangioni is accused of shooting and killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in Manhattan. Mangioni has pled not guilty to state and federal charges. If the judge takes the death penalty off the table, the trial will begin on October 13th. The Trump administration must keep federal funds flowing to child care subsidies in 5 democratically controlled states, at least for now. A federal judge making the ruling to extend an order that was issued earlier this month. That order blocked the government from holding the money back from California, Colorado, Illinois, Minnesota, and New York.
On Thursday, the chances of a shutdown ticking down slightly, but a partial government shutdown could still be on the horizon. The vast majority of House Democrats Thursday voting against a bill to fund the Department of Homeland Security, which includes Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE. Many Democrats calling the agency out of control and looking to put strict limitations on its power, with some heeding calls from activists to eliminate it altogether. The agency has drawn increased scrutiny in recent weeks after the shooting death of Renee Good by an ICE agent in Minneapolis. Many Democrats saying after that incident and other high-profile violent episodes involving ICE officers, they would not vote to fund the agency without significant reforms. But bipartisan negotiations on Capitol Hill yielding only modest reforms. Funding for body cameras, de-escalation training, and some additional oversight of the agency. Those guardrails not enough for all but 7 House Democrats.
The overwhelming majority of Democrats, over 200 Democrats, voted against this DHS and ICE funding bill today. And I think it is extremely important that everyone across the country recognize that. There are hundreds of members of Congress. Some are going to vote differently, but at the end of the day, Democrats stood in almost unanimity against this DHS bill, and that's how it should have been.
The House now leaving D.C. on recess and punting the bills to the U.S. Senate, putting the onus on a bipartisan group of senators to avert a partial government shutdown, which could happen as soon as January 31st. Already, days ahead of any eventual vote, a number of Senate Democrats making clear they're not supportive of the bill. Even a partial government shutdown could yield major disruption. If the Senate fails to approve funding for the Department of Homeland Security, not only would ICE go unfunded, but TSA agents who conduct airport screenings would go unpaid, and many employees of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, could be furloughed amid brutal winter storms. So much at stake as Democratic senators are forced to choose between taking a stand against ICE but risking a shutdown, or voting with most Republicans to fund the government. Nathaniel Reed, Scripps News Group, Washington.
Coming up on Today's It Happened.
They get top-notch care. They have medical care. The food is good. They have learning services. They have church services available.
I just can't imagine as a mother what she was going through. It was heartbreaking for me to hear her, and she looked up at me and said, "I don't understand what's happening. We're not criminals."
Watching Today As It Happened, Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. So let's jump right back in.
Now the latest on that 5-year-old boy taken away by ICE agents in Minnesota. School district officials there say the child is being held at an ICE detention center in Texas with his father. That may be the only thing that all sides seem to agree on in a case that is attracting worldwide attention. Scripps News legal affairs correspondent Avajoy Burnett is live in our D.C. newsroom. And Avajoy, the image of a child wearing bunny ears and a Spider-Man backpack has gone viral. What more are you finding out at this hour?
Hey there, Dell. We do know that the Department of Homeland Security spokesperson continues to tweet and post about this on social media, even in the last few minutes. Trish McLaughlin earlier today said that this 5-year-old, his name is Liam Conejo Ramos, is in custody in a facility in Texas, this 5-year-old. The backstory here is earlier this week, immigration officials tried to take his father into custody. This is according to officials, and they say the father ran away, leaving the little boy in a vehicle. Officials say they tried to get the mother to take that child, but many people on the ground there said the mother was afraid to come out of the home. So as a result, officials say they were forced to take the little boy into custody. Many of the witnesses on the ground said there were other people who were on the ground who were actually willing to take the little boy. But despite all of that reporting, officials with the DHS, with the Department of Homeland Security, said that they had to take this little boy into custody because the mother did not come out. And that is why he is now in custody. We also know that the father, according to officials, asked that he be sent to the same facility with the son, who is 5 years old. Take a listen to what officials said earlier today, because they're now receiving some backlash for taking this little boy into custody. They have described the facility that he's been taken to as a good facility. Take a listen to what they had to say.
I can tell you firsthand, they get top-notch care. They have medical care. The food is good. They have learning services. They have church services available. They have recreation. They have special caregivers to see to the needs of the children and the mothers or families that are there. It's better. Honestly, it's better than social services.
Now, there has been some reporting about the conditions in this particular facility. The Associated Press has spoken with family members who have young kids in this facility, and these family members describe this location in Texas as a not very good one. Kids have gotten sick there. They have had issues with being malnourished as well. And some people are asking, is it legal for a 5-year-old, for a child, to be taken into immigration custody? The short answer here is yes. However, according to immigration experts I've spoken with, they say there is a long-standing consent decree, almost 30 years standing, where there needs to be certain guidelines that the Department of Homeland Security or the government at large needs to follow. Number one, the safe needs to be safe. The space needs to be safe for the children, and they should only be in those facilities for a short amount of time. Of course, Del, this is something that so many people continue to watch, and we do know that officials with the administration continue to talk about it. Case in point, Tricia McLaughlin tweeting about this, posting about this within the last few minutes.
Joy, also, what are we hearing from the family and also the people who support them?
Yeah, this is a family that came to the United States back in 2024, so they haven't been here for very long. But we heard from the attorney who's representing that family, and he said his clients are not, quote, illegal aliens. He said they came here the proper way, and they were seeking a pathway to being able to remain here in the United States. The little boy, Liam, he's 5 years old, and he was in school in Minnesota. We heard from the superintendent for the school district that he attended school before he was taken into custody. This particular superintendent said she spoke with the mother of Liam. Take a listen to what the superintendent said.
She wanted Liam. She wanted to open the door. And I can't even imagine as a mother myself how conflicted she must have been seeing, and this is what she told me, seeing her husband standing in the driveway in handcuffs saying, don't open the door, and also hearing her little one. And she could see the ICE agent standing there at the door. So I just can't imagine as a mother what she was going through.
The superintendent there also said Liam is at least the fourth student in her district to be taken into custody by immigration officials. The other kids were a little bit older, though, 2 17-year-olds and a 10-year-old. So, Del, this particular situation, many people are watching to see exactly what will happen here. One of the immigration attorneys I spoke with earlier today said this long-standing consent decree usually means children should be released from custody from these sorts of facilities within 20 days. But at this point, he said there is a legal battle that is pending because the administration is trying to extend that time beyond the 20 days. This attorney, a professor at Georgetown Law, also wrote a book about this, talking about the potential psychological effects that these children could face if they stay in these facilities. Of course, that's another court case that I'll continue to follow, along with Liam's court case, as we see what happens in the coming days or possibly even weeks. Del.
And a reminder that an immigrant child is still a child. Scripps News Legal Affairs correspondent Avajoy Burnett live in D.C. for us. Avajoy, thank you very much. You may know Allison Camerata from her many years of anchoring morning shows on CNN and Fox News. Right now, we're happy to announce she is joining Scripps News as a special events anchor. And she is already hitting the ground running today, bringing us an exclusive interview with Don Lemon days after he was involved in that ICE protest inside that Minneapolis church. Hey, Allison. Good to see you again. What was Don's demeanor during the interview, and what did he have to say about Minnesota?
Well, Del, it was really interesting to sit down with my longtime friend, former colleague from CNN, Don Lemon. I would say that Don was calm. He was resolute. He was unapologetic about everything that happened in that St. Paul, Minnesota church. He says he was just there acting as a journalist. He thinks that he was protected by the First Amendment in order to be inside that church covering the protest. But he also does believe that this tension with the Department of Justice is not yet over for him.
You tell me. With this administration, you don't know. Look, I'm not naive. I think they're probably going to try again and again, as they did with Tish James and Comey and everyone. If one doesn't work, then they try something else, and that fails, and they try something else, and then they just don't give up because they want to save face. But I don't know what's next. I think what's next is that I have to be in it for the long haul, and just to be strong as always, and keep calm and carry on.
Because this federal magistrate judge said that they didn't have a case, basically. The Department of Justice said that they didn't have a case. I mean, the judge said the Department of Justice didn't have a case. But you think that it's not over?
No, I think it's not over. Because it doesn't matter if there's no law to fit. They will try to fit or retrofit something or go around a judge and just do it themselves. And It doesn't matter. And everything that they say pertains to protesters. I was not a protester. It's very clear about that. If you look at all the evidence, I'm not a protester. And so I think, Allison, not that I think, I know, I was the biggest name. And so if they get a Don Lemon, woohoo, that's a victory. And also, I'm the one who put the information out there.
Yeah, so Del, that's what Don feels. He does not think that this is over whatsoever, and he's sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop. But as I said, he's going to, as he said, he's going to keep calm and carry on and keep reporting and keep doing his independent journalism.
The special counsel Jack Smith said the same thing on Capitol Hill yesterday, saying he thinks he too is going to be the target. What surprised you most about what Don had to say?
Look, there's so much, Del, as you know, that is surprising about this story. Journalists are not normally threatened by the Department of Justice for covering any kind of protest. That's what we do. But one of the, I think, very peculiar elements of this is the public beef that Nicki Minaj, the rapper, is now having with Don Lemon. She has inserted herself on social media into this entire controversy. She's used really vulgar language to talk about Don Lemon, and so he has responded in kind, I would say, in terms of not pulling any punches, and he talked to me about what he thinks is behind this.
To say that you're a Christian and you're calling me out as a Christian and you know, I wouldn't do that to any other religion. Does she not recall the 2012 Grammy Awards when the Catholic Church came after her, when they said her performance at the Grammys was sacrilege? When the Catholic League and all of those folks and Christians were going after her for her egregious performance at the Grammys? She's a hypocrite. And also, reportedly, she's possibly an undocumented person. She has said that she's undocumented. She came as a child, and I don't know if she's ever registered to be a citizen. And if that is true, under those rules, which are under Donald Trump's rules, she should be picked up, detained, reported, and deported. And those are the people she's cozying up next to. The people who are protesting for the rights for people like her, who may not be documented or otherwise, immigrants in this country, and she is an immigrant. So I said, why do African Americans support her? Why do gay people support her? Members of the LGBTQ community support her? You shouldn't, because she's a homophobe and she's a racist. She's racist against, I believe, Black Americans.
So, Del, I'm going to guess that that's probably not the last we've heard of the conflict between Don Lemon and Nicki Minaj there.
We'll be right back to continue our rundown of today's top stories on Today's It Happened. Welcome back to Today's It Happened, Scripps News debrief of our top stories of the day, so let's jump right back in.
Pictures coming out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. It is 10 degrees below zero, but the protests against the Trump administration's aggressive immigration crackdowns continue there. Earlier, police arresting anti-immigration protesters at the city's airport, saying they overstepped their permits. Demonstrators say they are trying to call attention to Delta's participation in those deportations. A network of labor unions, progressive organizations, and clergy urging people to stay away from work. About 100 clergy have already been arrested, this according to Faith in Minnesota. A former Olympic snowboarder who was on the FBI's top 10 fugitives list has now been captured. 44-year-old Ryan Wedding was caught in New Mexico. He is accused of running a drug trafficking operation and orchestrating the killing of a federal witness. Wedding competed for his home country, Canada, and the 2002 Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City, again arrested in Mexico. Well, one day after returning from Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum, President Trump is back in Washington, where he is scheduled to participate in a series of meetings and signings that are taking place behind closed doors. Now, one of those scheduled meetings is with the Social Security Administrator, and it comes as we're learning that DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, might have had access to sensitive Social Security information. Scripps News White House reporter and producer Jacob Gardenschwartz joins us now live from the North Lawn with more on that. And Jacob, we haven't heard much about DOGE in quite some time. Why is the group back in the spotlight?
Yeah, Del. Well, as we reported about a year ago when the group was first launched, the idea behind DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, was to find, quote, waste, fraud, and abuse within the federal government. Elon Musk, the world's richest man, supporter of President Trump, turned antagonist to President Trump, now back in his good graces, was really the one who proposed the idea and served as his de facto leader for a good part of last year. He had promised that the agency or the department would find upwards of $1 trillion in government waste. And indeed, by the end of last year, as DOGE wrapped up much of its work, officials announced that they had made more than 29,000 cuts to government grants and contracts. And yet, government spending actually increased in that time in fiscal year 2025. Now, that in and of itself is not the new controversy today. What we are learning is new disclosures, as you noted, that point to the possibility of DOGE officials improperly, perhaps even illegally, accessing Americans' data through the Social Security Administration. As we reported throughout last year, DOGE's efforts drew a number of different lawsuits trying to block its work. And one of those lawsuits specifically honed in on that question of data sharing, whether DOGE officials would be misusing American sensitive data that was held by the Social Security Administration. Elon Musk and other DOGE officials really pushed back on those allegations publicly and in court. They promised that they were only trying to access the data as a part of their, investigations into waste, fraud, and abuse. Well, now, just a few days ago, we have a new legal disclosure from the Department of Justice, essentially a bit of a legal oopsie, saying, in fact, actually, they may have improperly accessed Social Security data. Among some of the announcements or disclosures that were made in this new government filing, that DOGE officials emailed an encrypted file believed to have sensitive data for upwards of 1,000 Americans to officials at the Department of Labor and Department of Homeland Security, that they shared sensitive Social Security data on a third-party Cloudflare server that was in violation of existing policies, and perhaps most startlingly, that one official entered into a data sharing agreement with a political advocacy group that was seeking to try to use Social Security data to cross-reference it against voter files and point to allegations of voter fraud. Now, the Department of Justice officials who made these disclosures announced that they still don't actually know what data was shared with whom, if that data still exists on some of these servers. They did note that they referred at least 2 possible violations of the Hatch Act. That's a federal law that prevents government workers from engaging in partisan politics while on the clock. We understand that that investigation may be ongoing. So, we've asked the White House today if they have any reaction to this news, and particularly if this has any bearing for the conversation the president is having this afternoon with the commissioner of the Social Security Administration. The White House declining to comment, as are Social Security Administration officials. But certainly a lot of red flags and a lot of more questions raised as we learn that some of the very fears about DOGE access to data security may have come to fruition. Del.
So, Jacob, that being the case, in light of these new revelations, what happens next?
Yeah, we're tracking a variety of different next steps, all involving sort of different aspects of the federal government. So there's those Hatch Act referrals I mentioned. Again, we know of at least 2 referrals to the Office of the Special Counsel that investigates these sorts of things. An official there told me that they are not able to comment on any ongoing investigations, but that if any charges are filed, those will be public. Then there's that ongoing court case where this revelation was made in the first place. Now, initially a judge had blocked the agency or blocked DOGE officials from accessing data in the agency, but the U.S. Supreme Court overturned that block, suggesting that DOGE could have access to it. That is now back in the legal system, and arguments are continuing in the Fourth Circuit. Certainly likely that these new revelations will play a big part in that.
Coming up on Today's It Happened.
Travel headaches already beginning ahead of that major winter storm. I'm Scripps News reporter Patrick Terpstra at Washington Reagan National Airport. Ahead, exactly why this storm might be so bad and how prepared are we?
Welcome back to Today's It Happened. I'm Stephanie Liebergan, so let's jump right back into our rundown of today's top stories.
This will be the largest snowfall we've seen in a long time.
Starting tomorrow, we ask that you stay off the roads as much as possible. Not only does staying off the roads ensure your safety, it ensures everyone's safety.
Well, one of the biggest winter storms in years threatening to upend your weekend plans from New Mexico all the way to New England. It is forecast to dump more than a foot of snow in some parts of the country. Other places will have to deal with that heavy glaze of ice that could knock out power for days. Travel disruptions are already starting to line up. Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra is live at Reagan National. And Patrick, the winter storm already affecting flight plans, so what's the latest?
Absolutely, Del. Hundreds of flights canceled for tomorrow, but today things actually looking pretty good. On time, on time, on time. Not a lot of disruptions, but I'll show you one thing over here. Dallas DFW canceled these flights. We are seeing DFW really going to have a lot of impacts from this storm. 2/3 of all flights tomorrow out of DFW into or out of have already been canceled as airlines prepare for this winter weather. Millions of Americans in the path of an epic winter storm.
Hunker down, change your habits, try to minimize your time outside.
Heavy snow, intense sleet, and freezing rain likely to blanket more than half of the country by Monday. The system forecast to start in the plains, then trudge east and into the south. In Nashville, new snowplows, including one named Dolly Plowton, on standby in the Music City. New England could see 2 feet of snow. The National Weather Service warning about the danger of ice, predicting widespread tree damage and prolonged power outages from snapped utility lines, especially in the south, including Texas, where just 5 years ago a storm took out much of its power grid. The state's governor pledging they're ready this time.
The ERCOT grid has never been stronger, never been more prepared, and is fully capable of handling this winter storm.
CNN reports FEMA is pausing the planned firings of hundreds of disaster workers ahead of the winter weather, avoiding more cuts for now to an agency already down 2,000 employees since President Trump took office. Now the agency says it's actively working with states to prepare. Meanwhile, millions of travelers set to be impacted by the storm.
I'm just glad that we booked a flight that left before it got here, so we don't have to deal with all the snow.
Flight Radar 24 circling a huge area of airports likely affected. By Friday evening, airlines had already canceled around 2,000 flights. And with Dallas predicted to get ice, we've seen American Airlines canceling 1 out of every 5 flights tomorrow. Of course, DFW, a big hub for American Airlines. And after the weather moves through, then comes the frigid temperatures. That means whatever falls, whether it's snow, sleet, freezing rain, in a lot of areas will stick around for a long time. 15 states now, Del, under states of emergency.
Patrick, if people did have travel plans over the weekend, what do they need to know?
Well, fortunately, Del, there has been a lot of flexibility with the airlines offering to move flights to today or cancel flights tomorrow and through the weekend without penalty for passengers. So important to get online and check in with flights, not only to see if your flights are still happening and will be on time, but to see if there are alternative options. The message airlines giving right now is if you can avoid flying this weekend, that's something to consider doing, Del.
Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra live for us at Reagan National Airport. Patrick, thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us on Today's It Happened. I'm Stephanie Liebergen. Have a great Friday night and a safe, warm, and wonderful weekend.